So I have come to the realization that it is very highly likely that I'm autistic, and I think that one of my special interests is relationships, and I think that's why I've done so many videos on relationships and why I'm so obsessed with them and obsessed with talking about them and reading about them and watching videos about them and analyzing my own relationship, and I'm interested in other people's relationships, and I watch like couples therapy videos, and I find it so fascinating. And I always thought like I was really into psychology, but maybe that's just a special interest. Like I'm fascinated by humans because I just don't understand them that well, and I've just never realised that I don't understand them and that I don't get why people do what they do or whatever. So like when I'm making these videos, actually, I'm wondering if maybe this is from a perspective of somebody who's a bit neurodivergent and not necessarily how other people are in relationships. But I wanted to kind of do another video on relationships because I feel like my relationship with my partner evolves so often, over time. The way that I relate to him now is so different to how I related to him in our early, relationship, or how I related to him in the middle of our relationship. If you think of the journey of a relationship, like for me, I feel like our relationship just evolves and changes and improves, and we both grow, and it's quite a fascinating thing to have happen to me because I don't feel like there's other relationships in my life where I've had that evolution and it's maintained. Like usually I feel like when you evolve, you don't, or well, I know some people do because my partner does with like his friends and things, but I think for me, for friends wise, like when I evolve and change, I usually get new friends because what drew me to somebody originally isn't drawing me to them anymore, or maybe that's because I evolved and they didn't, or we evolved in different ways, whereas me and my partner are evolving together. Maybe that's the difference. And yeah, I just thought I'd kind of share like my reflections and thoughts on relationships at this stage of time and my life, I suppose, as well. Um, I was kind of reflecting on, like, I have like obviously lots of videos that come up on reels, and because I'm obsessed with relationships, like a lot of stuff like that comes up. And a video that recently came up was something about like what's the divorce stat, and like 42% of marriages end in divorce. And there's loads of people that are not married, that are single, that can't maintain relationships or find relationships, and it's kind of like a bit of a sad state of affairs really, where people's relationships are not lasting like they used to, and there's obviously reasons and context behind that. Like, it's a lot easier for people to leave relationships when they're unhappy now. Before they could have been in those relationships and stayed even though they were unhappy, and maybe that's what's increasing the rate. But I find it really interesting that most people are single, most people are not together, and if they are together, it's not for very long. Um, or like it is for a period of time and then there's a divorce. Or do you see what I'm saying? So it's like, what's going on? Like why are people finding it so difficult to maintain a relationship? And I even think myself sometimes, like, my relationship is not easy. Like, it is really hard work. And I wonder if maybe other people don't recognise that relationships are work, and maybe they think that, oh, if it's not working, then it's not the right person, and then I need to move on and find somebody else, because I feel like you end up just cycling through people and repeating the same issues. Although, I mean, when I think about like my ex boyfriends, like I wouldn't have enjoyed being in a relationship with them. Let's put it that way. I'm glad that we broke up and it ended because the compatibility wasn't there. Whereas I suppose now in my relationship, like I feel like we are compatible, and I would want to make it work and work on things and things like that. But it's interesting because I feel like when you're having a relationship with somebody, you're having a relationship on different levels. So you've got your kind of like cognitive, rational level, where you're very aware of what's going on in your behaviour and how they're behaving on a very kind of like adult level. There's actually like what's it called? There's a is it in games people play? Transactional analysis is very transactional analysis, this kind of metaphor. So you're having a relationship on a cognitive level, on the rational level, you kind of best self, you kind of the version of you that's the most mature and the most adult, like you're having that kind of relationship. And then you've got the child version of you, which is like the emotional side of you, which is damaged for most of us. Like you're very lucky if you're not, and I'm very jealous of you if you're not. But there's the damaged child in us that has a lot of issues that we've maybe ignored or even just not realised because they only come out when you're in relation with somebody. And I think sometimes like people are in a relationship and they don't realise that it's not the person's fault that you are responding like that. It's that that relationship is triggering that from a previous time. And if you don't have that awareness, you can blame the other person for it and think it's them and not realise that it's also you. Um, so something that's kind of like playing out for me currently without being too open about it for loyalty towards my partner and not sharing things without kind of that's not mine to share, but from my kind of perspective, something that I'm learning about myself, so I'll share my own, is that I've got a few issues from childhood because of the way that I was raised, where I have a lot of trauma around not being seen and not being asked about my internal world to share that. And whether that's a story that I'm telling myself or whether that's actually a lived experience is quite difficult to unpick at this point because it's such a long time ago that I was a child, and we often tell ourselves stories that are not actually a reality of what happened. Um, and our felt experience is not really our rational experience. And so for me, I've got issues with that, which is interesting, isn't it? That I've got a YouTube channel and I talk about my internal world because then it makes me feel seen. It's very interesting, isn't it? I wonder if like people that are famous and the people that want that kind of level of, well, I mean, famous is another thing, isn't it? Because I don't want to be famous. I don't want people to actually know me or see me or whatever. Like I'm the complete opposite of that. But I think this what I'm doing is that element of childhood trauma coming out. And anyway, so in a relationship dynamic, if my partner is distracted by his own things that are going on in his head and he's not very present with me and I'm sharing something, on a rational level I can go, oh, it's because he's busy and he's had a tough day, and I can rationalise it. But it will deeply hurt me and I'll be very upset about it and I'll be very emotional about it. And if that builds up and builds up and builds up and isn't spoken about and isn't addressed or acknowledged or unpacked or anything because I'm busy and life is busy and whatever, then it ends up that you get into a dynamic with somebody where you almost, like, I can find myself being a little bit more negative towards him and a little bit more critical, and I'm not normally. And it's almost like because I'm getting him back for what he's done to me, and it's not conscious. Like, I'm not petty and I'm not like that, but I can see my behaviour and I'm like, why am I doing that? That's so bizarre. Like, what is the reason? What am I trying to achieve with that? And it's just because I'm frustrated that I'm not getting my needs met, so I'm not going to met his, because one of his needs is like validation. So it's like, it's very interesting, and it's like, really, I don't know if other people have this awareness or whether this is something that they experience as well. But it's like I've got two different versions of me. I've got the rational and I've got the emotional, and I'm trying to behave in the best way possible, but I can't just relax into it and just be my normal self, because then I'll be too emotional and I'll be negative and critical, and I'll let my own anxiety about things criticize the other person. So, like, I'll give an example. So we're planning a trip away in summer to Asia, and it's very logistic heavy. And I've done all my bit because I'm quite good at logistics, but my partner is not the best at logistics because he's very ADHD and, But anyway, that's another story. That's not for me to share really anyway. But just to give some context to the story, and so he takes a while to get things done. And he's very busy, like it's not because he's sitting around doing nothing, like he's incredibly busy all of the time. Like we've got such busy jobs, and then we've got loads of home stuff to sort out, and we've got all this like Asia stuff as well. And anyway, so it's been making me anxious because this has happened before when we went on our Latin America trip the previous year. It was very like last minute. When we moved house, he was very last minute. He's a very last minute person on a planner. So we've got like kind of conflicting things there. But it was making me anxious. But instead of like sitting down and expressing, oh, this is making me really, really anxious, like, could you like reassure me and tell me when you're going to do this job or that job or whatever? I've got really arsy about it and been like, when are you doing this? Like, and been kind of very unsupportive about it and let it build up and be a problem and not kind of talk about it. And so, yeah, I just thought I'd kind of like share that because I wonder if maybe like in other relationships, are people actually aware of this? Are people actually aware of how they're contributing to a negative dynamic in a partnership? Like, are they aware of, you can blame the other person and yeah, the other person is doing things, but that you're in relationship with each other. It's not like you do, I do. It's like it's a whole round thing. Like it's, everything that my partner does has an impact on me. Everything I do has an impact on him. And if one of us is out of kilter, it's like the other one has to kind of pick up the slack a little bit. And I like our relationship was not like that in the beginning in terms of having like this awareness. I suppose like maybe in the beginning you're in that kind of idealistic phase where you kind of excuse all the behaviour because you're just so happy to be in a relationship finally after so long, which was my case. I kind of just ignored all red flags, all problems. I was like, this is great. I love spending time with somebody. I love having all this love. I love, speaking for hours to somebody about things that I'm really interested in that other people don't really care about because they don't seem to have special interests. And and yeah, like I think you excuse a lot and you suppress a lot and you don't talk about it a lot. But then after like a year of doing that, things are going to start to bubble up. And if you don't have the communication skills, and or like it's interesting, like the dynamic in my relationship is that I'm good at communicating, but not the way I communicate. And my partner's good at the way he communicates, but he doesn't communicate. So it's like we've got the opposite problem, and then that causes issues because they're things that we have to work on. But it's like it's not like I'm going, right, I need to be in a relationship with someone that can do everything that I need them to do, because people are human and people have their own traumas and experiences and are at different life stages. And it's almost like I'm not perfect and I've got things that I need to work on and things that are detrimental to our relationship that I need to work on in a similar way that he does. But that doesn't affect the quality of our relationship overall because we're both working on trying to sort those things out. Like we've got that awareness, and I feel like maybe that's why relationships break down, because people don't think that they need to work, or maybe only one person's working. But then I do think, like, I watch a lot of like couple therapy videos, and it's always, and I've fallen in the trap as well, so I'm not, this is not a judgment, this is just an observation of kind of human dynamics in relationships. It's very easy to say, oh well, the reason why we're having this argument is because he did this or she did this or whatever it is. And it's like, actually, what did what did I contribute to it? Like, what did I do in that situation? And this is not, it's not about blame, it's about figuring out what did you do that contributed to it that then led to it escalating. Because if you can figure those things out and get an awareness of them, you can solve them. But then, it's a fool's errand in the sense of you're always going to have problems, you're always going to have situations where you don't get on, where you need to talk about things, where you're upset about things. And, to be able to acknowledge that that is going to happen and that it's not pleasant, but you can't have a loving relationship without having that. And I do wonder about these people who have a wonderful relationship and never argue. And, I think like, is it George Clooney and is it Amar or something like that? And they were like, oh, it's so wonderful. And I was like, good for you, because that, I don't think that that's a reality. I don't think many relationships are like that. I think, and particularly if you've come from a traumatic childhood experience and you've got a lot of issues from that, I think how could you possibly have a wonderful relationship that's not um that's not got its things that you need to kind of discuss and work through if you've got all that baggage. Like I just don't see how you can have a wonderful, unless it's just people's perspectives. You know, I think as well, like that's another thing from childhood trauma, isn't it? It's like your perspective on what does conflict mean, because there's a lot of people that are averse to conflict and don't want to have disagreements and so whatever, talk about things, or people that want to have those conversations but don't know how to have those conversations without blaming or shaming the other person, because they don't hear their own words. You know, it's what one thing that I've really learned about my relationship is how to, and I'm still not very good at it because it was never modelled very well to me as a child, how to communicate something that you're upset about without shaming or blaming the other person. That's something that I've really, really learned being in a relationship with my partner, because when he sometimes reflects back some of the things that I've said, I'm like, oh God, if you'd have said that to me. And there's times that he has said something to me that I've said to him in the past, and I'm like, oh, I can see why he was upset about that, because that's horrible, and I don't want you to feel like that. Like for me, again, it's maybe it's an autism thing. For me, it's like I'm just trying to tell the truth. I'm just trying to tell you how I'm actually feeling, but it's sometimes not kind to do that, because sometimes our feelings are transitory and they're affected by hormones, and they're affected by things that are not actually true for us on a daily basis. And so our perception sometimes is warped by our emotions without us even realizing it. And it's interesting when you become aware of it and you're like, wow, that was crazy. And now I'm realizing, actually, yeah, like um so yeah, I just thought I'd do a little video about my kind of musings about it, because I do wonder, like, if people are in relationships and they're thinking, oh, a relationship's not supposed to be like this, because no one ever talks about when they're having issues, or when they've had an argument, or like people joke about it, but it's not really properly spoken about. And for me, I didn't really know what a relationship was like, because I never saw my parents argue ever. Like they got a bit annoyed at each other every so often, but they never argued. And clearly, there are things that are dysfunctional there, but um, it was never in front of us. So, as obviously, like maybe it's behind closed doors, but that's not been shared. And like similarly, like with when I think about like relationships in my family, like the things that I've had modelled to me, it doesn't look like anyone's falling out or arguing, but then they end up getting divorced. And you're like, where did that come from? Because no one talks about it. So it's like it's just really interesting. Like you never really know what people's relationships are like and what kind of things that they struggle with or whatever, which is why I find these like couples therapy videos really, really interesting, because when you look at a few of them, and I've read a few couples therapy books and stuff as well to like help with my relationship and trying to dismantle childhood trauma and stuff like that so I don't pass it on to my own kids. When you read things, like things are pretty common, like things are pretty common in relationships, like maybe they're warped a little bit because they're based on people that come to couples therapy, but I imagine that it's quite common. Like Esther Perel talks a lot about it. I think she's amazing. The Gottsmans talk about it a lot. Is it Gottsman or Gottsman? Whatever. Um, so yeah, so that was a bit of a ramble, but there we go. I enjoyed myself.